Welcome to this Wait for Fire YouTube video. Today we're going to be looking at and reviewing a new game system for World War I by Firelock Games, and that's called Blood and Valor. So here it is, a hardback book. Fantastic, really. It's great to see a new rule set coming out for World War I gaming, and aimed at 28mm as well, which is my favourite scale of gaming. World War I doesn't really get so much attention as it should do for gaming. I think there's a lot of sort of feeling that the battles are too big, too bloody, there's not enough tactical sort of nuance to them, but actually most of the fighting, aside from the big sort of main battles of, say, the Somme or Passchendaele, most of the fighting was actually at a relatively small scale, capturing localized objectives, so it really does suit wargaming, and I think this rule set tries to address that very, very nicely. So the book itself is 114 pages, hardback, very high quality production actually, paper's good, full colour throughout, so really nice pictures of miniatures, and the diagrams are actually very, very good indeed. The rules themselves though only take up about 38 pages, and even then if you were to take out the art it would be much, much less. So that doesn't mean it's a simple game. I think it's actually quite a lot of nuance to it. The rest of the rulebook is taken up with the faction list, of which there are 11, covering the main combatant nations on the Western Front and the Middle East. So that's the British, Germans, French, also the Australian New Zealand Army Corps, the Anzacs, and the Ottoman Empire, plus local levies and recruits from the wars in Africa and Palestine, with say Lawrence of Arabia as well. So very nice ideas focusing on those areas. Oh, and America as well, I forgot to use America, sorry, you guys got a bit late, but I forgot to say America. The major armies not included are the Austrian, Hungarian army, and Russia, which I believe is coming out on a future supplement. I think that's a bit of a shame it's not in, but I can understand why. I mean, you've got to pick what you want. The guys who wrote this, Rufus and Kai Devane, they're from America, so I think it's perfectly reasonable to pick the Western Front. It's the biggest theatre for a gaming point of view, really. I think it's logical, and then there is a planned supplement coming which I believe will focus on those other major conflicts as well. Slightly unusually, it uses a D10 system rather than a D6 system. I think in the later video I actually mentioned D6s, but it's not, it's D10s. Which is a nice touch actually. I think there's a lot more range in results when you roll a D10 rather than a D6. So I think that's quite a nice touch. Hopefully it will translate to a bit more fun when it comes to rolling the wrong number. And I think also you don't need masses of dice, so it's fine. Holding a bunch of D10s is fine if you've got like only a handful of them, less than 10 of them. I think it's no problem at all. It uses an interesting system of bidding to see who goes first, so it's not an I go, you go system. I'm a little unsure about that, as I mentioned later on, but it's a good way of trying to sort of give you tactical superiority during the game, and I do love anything in a war game that makes you think and react to what the other player has done as well. So your plan beforehand might be, okay, I'm going to move this way, but then your opponent does something else and you have to then shoot over and deal with that. So I really like that sort of having to think on your feet during a game. I think it's a really important part of certainly skirmish level gaming, or any gaming really. They have a fatigue system as well, and that's how you sort of deplete units as well as killing them. You can make them combat ineffective by increasing the fatigue on them. There are even heroes in it. Not 100% sure about that, but there are certainly some famous characters, Lawrence of Arabia being one of them, who perhaps need a special mention, but I don't think it's really heroic in that way, but it's quite nice, I guess, in some ways, that you could give your guys names then. You could have your local leader have his own sort of personality, particularly if you're playing a campaign or a series of linked scenarios. I think that might be quite a nice touch. There are 5 scenarios, 5 sort of competitive level scenarios, and then 5 narrative scenarios. And I think they're a fantastic touch having a narrative scenarios in there. They allow sort of objectives like tanks and aeroplanes, really thematically strong for World War I. Really good touch to have those included. Having said all of that, it's very much based at company level, but there is room for tanks in there, as well as artillery barrages. And I think those are, and gas barrages, Those things coming into a World War I game give it a lot more character. I don't know if you use them all the time. Most likely you're going to be just rifles, LMGs and HMGs, maybe a trench mortar or two. You know, you're going to be at that level of conflict. But the occasional use of a tank or barrages is going to give it a strong theme as well. And certainly, you know, in other parts of other theatres other than the Western Front, armoured cars, cavalry, they played a huge role in, say, Iraq or Palestine, to get so quickly into different places when you're talking about large expanses of distance. It plays on a 3x3 mat, and then increases up to a 4x3 or a 6x3 mat or table, depending on the size of the game you want to play. So as most people probably got 6x4s, I think you just trim a few inches off each side, don't you, to play. So it's not a standard size as such, I don't think. 3x3, not the most common. Lots of people play games on, say, 2x2 or 4x4s, I think. But I think, you know, it's fine, isn't it? And I'm sure it would make a lot of difference if you played on something larger and just trimmed back. So overall, I think it's a very nice rule system, and we'll have a look inside now. So here we have the book, Blood and Valor, hardcover, nice spine. It's sort of a slightly odd sort of appearance here as they've laminated the cover. Not quite sure why, it's something from the printers. The back tells you the armies that are in, actually. So Western Front, Gallipoli campaign, Southeast Africa and the Near East. Very much focused on Britain, France, Germany and the USA's involvement. Although the Ottoman army is in there and the Anzacs are in there as well, I'd sort of class them in with the British Empire, of course. Nothing really on the Eastern Front yet, but there is a supplement coming, I believe. So let's have a little look inside. So we start with a nice overview of the main areas of the conflict and the main aggressors. See here, so some nice full colour pictures throughout. The whole book is full colour. Now, again, you can see here the miniatures displayed. This contents page, for some reason, is too small. I don't know why they've compressed it all with the art here. It just makes it unnecessarily difficult to see. But the chapters are laid out very nicely. You can see that the game mechanics really make up these first 30-ish pages, and then the rest is the scenarios and the faction lists. We'll have a little look through here. So again, some lovely full colour art. Again, they do this thing where they compress the text, so just a very small amount of text. There's some nice pictures though of, I presume, the rules writer's own miniatures. And again, that sort of precedes every chapter, and then there's the occasional other one. These are big pictures. So they're quite nice. A timeline, so if you don't know anything about World War I or have a very cursory sort of interest in it, then this will guide you through quite nicely some of the key elements of it. It probably doesn't add a lot to you if you know a lot about the period already, but it's an important thing in any historical game, I think, to have a bit of a timeline. How do you use the book? So tell you the basics, the usual thing of, you know, this is all the miniatures you use, how they should be based, you have to use a tape measure, play on this size board. And interestingly, they say that ideally you want to play on a 3x3 or a 3x4 foot board. So 3x3, fairly common size, 3x4 not so common. I'm sure you could play on any size you want. It's just as usual with any rule set, the larger it gets, if it's not designed for that scale, it can slow up a bit, and I think as we come on to talk about the rules a bit more, that will be evident in one particular circumstance, certainly. The usual sort of rules here as to sort of zones of control and fatigue. So they have this fatigue system here, which you can see, where as you accrue more and more fatigue from being shot at or losing miniatures, you'll lose actions, and you'll also become shaken, and eventually if you get enough, you'll just be removed from the game. So it's a way of showing how much pressure units are under But they use a similar sort of zone of control as, say, games like 40k or something like that. Okay, but the fatigue is quite a nice bit, I think. Then it breaks it down into turns. So again, we've got some French on here. There's an interesting mechanic here, which I must say I'm not 100% sold on, but I will caveat I haven't played yet, saying that you bid to see who goes first at the beginning of each activation and each round. And you can bid a variety of different points, and you get a number of points based on the number of units you've got. I'm not massively convinced by that. It seems to be something that just slows things down, but I'll reserve full judgment until I've played a game or two. But it's an interesting thing to allow that it's not an I go you go system. You are trying to emphasise the units that you really want to do. So if you've got something that absolutely has to happen, then you bid heavy for it. And if your opponent's happy for you to have that happen, then they might try and bluff you and save their points as well. So it's interesting. I'm just not quite sure it's necessary, and I have a feeling it might slow down elements of it. But I'm certainly very happy to be convinced otherwise when I play. We've got unit actions, so the usual things: shoot, aim, rally, take cover, fight. And then there are some sort of generic free actions that can happen. There's also here a different sort of action that can happen. So your leaders can do a sort of with me sort of action, which they call the over the top or grand maneuver. So giving your figures, your characters, your leaders a little bit more importance than they might otherwise have. They do have importance, of course. So I think this is quite nice. I like the way this is laid out. It's very clear what happens. Seems to be quite straightforward. And of course, when we talked about fatigue before, you lose actions. You normally get 2 actions every round, but of course you'll lose one if your fatigue has been higher, so it will make you less able to do stuff. Section on terrain, obviously important in a game set in World War I, where the landscapes were very much disrupted and lots of the fighting would have been over very difficult terrain, either urban terrain that's been destroyed or rural terrain that's been destroyed, or actually if you're doing the early war or the later parts of the war, actually in the open green fields. So there's a bit of explanation as to that here. Range combat. So ranges are quite short in this game. A lot of weapons are firing at less than 18 inches, certainly the submachine guns and things like that. And then it's harder to fire at greater range as well, as you can see down here. So it's much easier to shoot things if they're up close. There's also different types of weapons. So you can see, let's have a look at some of these weapons. Look a little bit closer. So you can see this submachine gun has a range of just 12 inches, fires only 1 shot. Flamethrower has a range of only 4 inches. Let's try for sort of a normal rifle. So here's a normal rifle. Range is actually the whole length of the table, but only a single shot, of course. And then we obviously have templates for things like mortars and for heavy machine guns and so on. But it covers a nice range of weapons. So we've got flamethrowers, like I mentioned, but we've also got trench catapults, rifle grenades, small infantry guns that might have been close to the battlefield lines, sniper rifles, pistols. Yeah, I like it. It's a nice range of options of weapons for the common things you would find. Also, another element I quite like, there is barrages here. So clearly a very important element of certainly the large offences was to do preliminary bombardments or to bring in fire if a particular strong point was found. And another really nice thing about this is that the barrage can be either from land-based artillery or even for naval guns, so they add a difference there, which I think is really good. Plus gas, of course. Now the use of gas in combat is really quite unique for World War I, and it's not probably covered in many other game systems at all. Smoke occasionally, but the fact that we have gas that does damage here, I think is a really thematically strong touch for a World War I game. It's really good. Section on close combat now. Again, nice big full colour art. So usual sort of stuff. How do you charge? How do you fight? Who wins? Who falls back? Fairly brief though, really. I mean, if you take out the art, there's really only a page of rules here. Building a force. So there are a lot of lists in here, faction lists. There's actually 11 covering the French, Germans, British, Americans, Belgians, I think Belgians, Ottomans and the Anzacs as well. No Russian or Austrian though, but like I said before, there'll be a supplement coming, I believe, which will cover those. You've got a stat profile. Let's have a little look at that. So tells you this is by units. Okay, so you don't buy individual men, you buy the unit. So this unit consists of, this is a British Rifleman section corps, so there'll be different types. So the list might not be quite the same if you're using a list from the Western Front, say in 1916, versus from Gallipoli in 1915. I think 1915. I forget. Tells you what they've got. Tells you that you can have extra models. Did they have any special rules? Yes, these are assault experts apparently. I think most British soldiers probably weren't, but these ones have been classed as that. And they come with their basic weapons, which is a rifle. And then there's alternative weapons. So if you're used to things like bolt action or something like that, you can, or even 40k, you can see that you can add on different weapons. So grenades, rifle grenade, or a light machine gun, it would be a Lewis gun in the British. Tells you what the stats are for shooting. Uses a standard D6 game mechanic for rolling dice here. Tells you the cost of the unit itself and initiative, which is important for how units activate. So there's a list of special rules here, which will be different for different armies, of course, and different theatres potentially. And that's it for the rules, really, because we're now up to the force lists. So, for the force lists, there are lots, like I say, I'll just go through them all. So we start with the British. You've got your command team, so a lieutenant with 2 riflemen. You can upgrade him to a captain, okay. You can even have a major, okay, so if you really wanted to go heavy. And then you've got, slightly incongruously, not what I was expecting, you've got some heroic figures. Okay, so you've got Lieutenant Edgar Towner, whoever he is. I'm sure he's very important. And then you've got Lieutenant J.R.R. Tolkien, okay, which is a lovely little nod, really, to us geeks. I don't think Tolkien's experience of World War I was particularly enjoyable, but he seems to have made it in here, which is nice. It's a nice touch. You'll notice that for the commanders, they have a command range as well, a number of command points, which is really important for sort of activating your units and do these special abilities. Here we come to the actual units themselves. You've got riflemen. You've actually got a named company sergeant major for some reason as well. Again, you know, picking characters from history. I'm in two minds about that. It's a nice touch. I don't think it's really necessary, to be honest, for a global conflict like this, where I don't think there were really any heroes, to be honest. There were people who managed to control their emotions a little better, perhaps, but I don't think there are any heroes in war. But then you have different units themselves with different experiences. We've got the core one up here at the top of the page, and then we've got an inexperienced infantry unit here. So these would potentially be, say, the new Kitchener Army sort of soldiers, very little training. Sniper team, again, a named model. I get a bit too many, actually, named models for me. Heavy machine gun, trench raiders. Trench raiding, I think, is likely to be a common thing that people play, just because of the nature of the games being small and quite fun. You've got missions that are sort of targeted. Now they're close combat specialists, this time with Scots, so giving the Scots a sort of national advantage, which is pretty common in games. Again, whether it really was a thing is debatable. Likewise with the Gurkhas, and then even cavalry. Now cavalry are often omitted from World War I games, but actually they did play an important part, nowhere near the sort of what they were planned to do before the war, you know, charging the enemy down, but they did exploit breakthroughs throughout the war, actually. So it's nice that they're included. And then we've got the similar sort of thing. So we've got the British here, much of it's the same, but it says here that the campaign in Aniri, so it tells you what's the same, and then it gives you extra options. So we've got Lawrence of Arabia, of course, why wouldn't you? We've then got Arab Irregular riflemen, so tribesmen typically. Australian Light Horse, very famous regiments. Arab Irregular Cavalry, Arab Irregular sort of combat teams. So again, just giving it a real nice theme there. We then move on to the East Africa campaign, which was a very bloody campaign fought between the British and the British Empire and the German Empire. And again, this is just the British list, so we've got the leaders here, and then we've got different sorts of infantry, so riflemen, British riflemen, British King's African riflemen, so these will have been natively recruited African soldiers who are under the British Empire. Sniper team, heavy machine guns, so a bit more limited here, colonial close assault and artillery at the bottom there. We then go on to the Anzacs, Australian New Zealand Army Corps, so obviously this is predominantly for the Gallipoli campaign. But other parts of the Arab wars as well would have been represented here, say such as Kuwait, Iraq. And again, they've got lists here. I'm not going to go through all of the different things. Interestingly, they've got a naval division in here as well, which is a nice touch, I think. Next army to come across is the Germans. So Germans, really Western Front, of course. And a little bit in the sort of Africa as well. It's a very similar form. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'll just show you just briefly. If you want to have a closer look, then obviously you can pause or you can buy the book. Yeah, Rifleman Units. They're very formulated. The armies aren't really much different, really, in their style. One unit they do have, which is a bit weird, they have this submachine gun unit here. So this unit is obviously a lot more sort of submachine guns. Germans did typically use them a bit more, or sort of in the common parlance they seem to use them a bit more. But German East Africans, so again using their Askaris, which is their native troops, as well as their colonial Marines typically, and then their leader von Letto Vorbeck, who very famously fought a very strong campaign. Yeah, so some stormtroopers here, Schutztruppen, sorry, Askari, yes, like I said. The French, again, similar sorts of things here, really different, again, a little bit of different sort of national characteristics. Ottoman Empire for those Eastern and Arabic wars, Gallipoli, Palestine, Iraq. And then the American army obviously came in towards the end of the war, but played a very important contribution. And their army is, again, very similar in lots of ways to the British, it's certainly in look, and supplied also by so they have a mixture of sort of French weaponry and British uniforms, really. They look quite more British in their appearance. And then the Belgian army, which certainly had a very important role at the beginning of the war and then played a very sort of static role throughout the rest of the war, but is again a really nice inclusion that these early war units are included, despite the fact that obviously this goes all the way through. They've even got some fort guns here, so these guns are for sort of the actual early battles against the Belgian defensive lines. And that's it. And then we start talking about games. So starting a game, again, it's full colour art, really nice, really good pictures. I'm going to be honest, I think the pictures are well done. I suspect these miniatures are the author's own collection, and I'm not a perfect painter either, so I think that's I'm not criticising really, but I think if you're producing a high quality hardback book in full colour, you sort of feel that some of the miniatures used could have been professionally painted, which may really have helped the imagery to shine, because I think it's just a little bit of a letdown, unfortunately, that they are the tabletop standard and not pro-painted. Right, so when we come here, we talk about so the first thing to do about scenarios is to determine what scenarios you want to play and what size games. So it gives you the different points values and then how big to play the game on. So they suggest 150, 200 points, 3x3, 200 to 300, 3x4, and 300 or more points, 3 foot by 6 foot. Okay, so lots of people have got a 6 foot by 4 foot table they play on, but obviously you just trim off a couple of inches off each side to make that a more suitable size for this game. Choose a scenario or roll a dice. So you've got 5 basic scenarios here. These are sort of the more balanced scenarios. And then there are some other interesting scenarios afterwards. So it tells you how to win. You either win by destroying the army or kill points or gaining objectives. The scenarios themselves, really nicely laid out. Description of how long each turn, each game should be, what the setup is. The setup is potentially varies quite a lot. And then, so that's the core ones, as it were. And then we go on to the narrative scenarios. These, I think, are fantastic. Really, really nice touch to bring in interesting bits of the war that you want to sort of show off. So we've got, first one here, disabled tank. Everyone wants to have a tank, don't they? But would you run it normally? No. So make it a scenario piece and an objective for the game. Brilliant, well done. That's an excellent sort of idea. So we've got disabled tank, downed pilot, and I've seen people posting their tanks and their pilots and their damaged Sopwith camels on the Facebook page for this game, and they are cracking pieces of scenery, they really are. Night raid, obviously we talked before in the list about how much fun that could be. Achtung sniper, okay, so avoiding a sniper, trying to locate the sniper, sniping being a very important part of World War I on sort of daily basis. And then a tank assault itself. So these scenarios very different in their layout, not necessarily balanced in the same way, but I think, you know, playing with friends, they're going to be a lot of fun, I think. Really, really interested. And then, rather surprisingly for a game that is set at the sort of company level or smaller, we've got a whole chapter on tanks. So you can see this, probably a Mark IV male tank here. But it's not just British tanks. It tells you how to use them, tells you how they break down. We've got tanks and they have their own template. So this is an A7V from Germany. Not that hardly any were ever actually used, but everyone seems to want one. We've then got 2 different types of Mark IVs, a male and a female. Females being armed with heavy machine guns only, and the male being infantry guns plus heavy machine guns. Then we have some, what was that? Is that a Mark IV or is that a Mark V I did before? They're both Mark IVs. I'm not quite sure what the difference is on these ones, to be honest here. Oh, I need to check that. And then we get some French, well, we've got a British lighter tank, a Whippet, which came towards the end of the war, very much more in the sort of cavalry feel of early tank design. And then a Renault FT-17, which was certainly not suitable for World War II, but was still seen at that stage, certainly in smaller armies and the French army as well. And then we have a Chamond, which is a French tank, a very good French tank actually, certainly not great perhaps at traversing trenches like the British ones were, but a very versatile tank nonetheless. Really nice. And then an index, not often seen in wargaming rule sets actually, surprisingly important sort of element, and a really comprehensive one actually, you know, several pages long. At the end, the final things is you do need some tokens for the game. There's a crib sheet which you photocopy out. I don't know if there's probably a PDF of it somewhere on either the Facebook page or the Firelock Games website. Tokens, I suspect at some point there'll be official ones to buy. I don't think they're out just yet. And they are producing their own line of miniatures, which I think is just coming available now, actually. And if the renders are anything to go by, I think they're very good. I particularly like the French, actually. These are Americans, presumably, on top. Certainly looks like Americans for the machine gun. So I think, yeah, I think that's good. And then obviously there are adverts for their other game systems that they have. Notes, for some reason. I never keep notes, why would you do that? But anyway, that's fine. So, there we go. Blood and Valor. So I hope you enjoyed that look through of Blood and Valor rulebook from Firelock Games. I really like it, good points. It's Unusual to have a rule set for World War I, actually. Don't see many around, and it's fantastic to have one of such high quality produced. It covers a lot of the war on the Western Front, but also the Middle East and Africa as well. The narrative scenarios, I think, look fantastic. Really, really impressed by them. Impressed by the range of units you can take as well. Overall, very high quality production, and the games look like they'll be a lot of fun. I haven't got to play it yet, unfortunately, because of the current situation. I haven't got anyone to play with, but hopefully that will be resolved soon, and I will be doing some videos on gameplay when I get the opportunity. Some downsides, very minor really. Some of the page alignment, there's a couple of issues there, just minor sorts of thing. I'm not 100% sold on the bidding for command, as I said before. I just don't really like the bidding bit. I don't mind there being alternate, sort of a break in the alternate activation system. I think that's a good thing. But I wonder whether things like command points might have been a better way to do it rather than just bidding. It just seems an interaction between players that could lead to friction, and I don't think is really that important. It's going to be probably fairly slow, I think, at least to start with. As I mentioned when I was doing a flip through, some of the pictures, I think they've just let themselves a little bit down, I'm afraid, by using probably miniatures like I would paint, actually, rather than going to use miniatures that are professionally painted, and I think that's a shame, because some of these big blown up full page or double page pictures, it just makes it look a little bit more obvious as well that a better paint job could have made a lot of difference to how it looks. And you've got hard back production here, glossy, just missed it there a little bit. No Russians or Austrians or Italians actually as well in the army, which is a bit of a shame, but it's a hefty book. You've got to draw the line somewhere, I guess. I think that's perfectly reasonable. Overall, I think it looks really, really good. High quality production. The rules look fun, look interesting. And if I was to give it a score out of 10, I'd say probably an 8 out of 10, I think. I'm really, really looking forward to playing this game. World War I is a period I'm very, very keen on. I've been painting up miniatures. As soon as I knew this rule set was coming, I started painting up miniatures to get an army that I could play. And then as soon as I can, I will bring you some battle reports. So great, thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this review useful. Please check out the Way to Fire Facebook page and the Way to Fire podcast, and please like, comment and subscribe, and check out our other videos. Thank you very much. Bye. So I hope you like that review. Please check out our other videos. Please like, comment and subscribe, and check out the Way to Fire Facebook page and listen out for the Way to Fire podcast. Thanks very much. Bye.